Yeah, if I were placing an even money bet, I would say that we'll see 75K before December 31st. So another 20K up from here. But it wouldn't be a big deal if that was delayed into Q1. And, I'm certainly not. Bitcoin can trade sort of in lockstep with NASDAQ stocks for short periods of time. But in the long run, this is a secular trend that's orthogonal to what's going on in stock markets. Bitcoin doesn't have that. Bitcoin is the surviving asset. There is no survivorship bias in Bitcoin. So it going up is better than looking at indices that go up over time.
Cory Klippsten, CEO of Swan Bitcoin, predicted 2024's Bitcoin highs and now says we're on the edge of something even bigger. He's doubling down on his $1 million Bitcoin prediction, and it could happen sooner than you think. In this video, we break down exactly how Cory sees Bitcoin closing out 2024 and why he believes a massive shift is just around the corner. Stick around. This is a call you don't want to miss.
I think did come to fruition was what I was calling in Q4 and the lead up to what I expected would happen with the ETFs passing was a ETF multiplier effect, where I thought that all the existing sellers of actual Bitcoin, spot Bitcoin, rather than sort of the paper IOU Bitcoins and the ETFs would do a lot better as well because of the validation and the marketing juice of the launch of the ETFs and just sort of it being safer for everyone to talk about Bitcoin. And I think that has happened in spades. We've been up a ton this year. As expected. And, I really look at the ETFs as a great top of funnel for actual Bitcoin that you can take into self-custody. So that's something that I did expect to happen. Something that I did not expect to happen to the degree that it did was it becoming such a political football and a campaign issue and something that was part of the active conversation in the election cycle. And I thought that's been really fascinating to watch from May onward, I guess is about when that started, almost 4 months ago. It does look like we are expecting a rate cut here in September, and whether that's just the Fed sort of asserting that they can still do such things and the economy is in a position to be able to handle that sort of thing is for others to break down, but it does look like we're getting one. My expectation is that will be probably the only one, so I don't think this is going to start a rate cutting cycle, and I think that we'll probably end up staying flat the rest of the year. So we will see. I do think there's been a history of once elections are in the rear view and people know what they're going to get for the next 4 years at least, to some degree, there's a bit of, okay, now I can sort of settle the bets that I've had on for the last 6 months or the last 12 months, and now I can sort of place my new ones and sort of understand what the protocol is going to be going forward. So I think that's probably net good for Bitcoin, on top of the cycles, obviously, that we've seen with bull markets in 2013, 2017, 2021, related to the Bitcoin halving. Probably until we stop seeing cycles, I kind of have to believe in them and have to plan for them. So that's what I expect to see on the Bitcoin side. If you're kind of looking at a macro picture, it seems like presidential elections kind of coincide with money printing after somebody gets elected, no matter which party it is. And that tends to be pretty good for Bitcoin price development as well. Yeah, if I were placing an even money bet, I would say that we'll see 75K before December 31st. So another 20K up from here. But it wouldn't be a big deal if that was delayed into Q1. And, I'm certainly not saying that you need to plow all your money into Bitcoin right now because it's definitely going up. As you know, I very much am a proponent of buying it for the long term and thinking about 5 and 10 year holding periods for this asset. Bitcoin can trade sort of in lockstep with NASDAQ stocks for short periods of time. But in the long run, this is a secular trend that's orthogonal to what's going on in stock markets. It is affected in the short term by liquidity, but overall, what we're just seeing is the adoption of a new monetary asset that's going to take decades to happen, and it's going to go up regardless of what's happening in other markets. And that's what's kind of special about Bitcoin. It is uncorrelated as a growth story to everything else in every other asset class, at least while they're in power, sort of negative for banking relationships for Bitcoin and for crypto, and potentially some onerous regulations with regards to how the fiat system connects to Bitcoin. If there is legislation in the next 4 years under a Trump administration that actually calls it something like strategic Bitcoin reserve, I would lose an even money bet. I don't expect that. I don't expect that to actually happen. Yeah, even under a Trump administration. I could see them maybe like not selling the coins, which I think that a Harris administration would probably try to sell those coins and doesn't want the Bitcoin on the government balance sheet. But we'll see. I think in the broader view, I think it's inevitable that many nations hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I think it's pretty clear that there are some countries around the world beyond just publicly obvious ones like El Salvador. I think there's enough industry rumor of accumulation by sovereign wealth funds, at least, and potentially even state entities in the Middle East, possibly China, almost certainly Russia, have been either buying or mining Bitcoin and stockpiling to some degree. So I think that's probably evidenced in the, if you look at the Bitcoin mining network hash rate, and, a quarter of it is the large public Bitcoin miners. The other 3/4, there are bound to be some large actors in that have a lot of hash rate, regardless of how well they're masking it. I still don't see it being a tipping point there. It seems like it's a bit of a slow burn with these things, and I think we're just far away. I think it'll be $1 million a coin before you actually see a tipping point, and there's like a race among nations to add Bitcoin to their reserves.
Cory Klippsten's 2024 Bitcoin predictions have been eerily accurate, and he's not done yet. Bitcoin smashed through $73,000 in March, and with spot ETFs stacking up over $48 billion, institutional interest is at an all-time high. Klippsten points to massive sovereign wealth funds, like those in the Middle East, quietly accumulating Bitcoin, setting the stage for global adoption. He's calling for Bitcoin to potentially hit $75,000 by year-end. But what does this mean for your investments? Stay with us as we dive deeper into Klippsten's insights, uncover the trends driving these predictions, and explore the potential risks and rewards. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
But yeah, I think the pace of adoption here, and then you also have to think about if there's a bull run and you see a 3x or a 4x rise in the Bitcoin price from here, that's automatically going to boost the AUM of the Bitcoin ETFs, along with all of the inflows that you would expect with early stage and then late stage mania of another bull cycle. So that seems pretty. I would expect that Bitcoin ETF aggregate AUM would pass the gold ETFs if it's only a 2x from here. That should happen next year.
To a degree, you get centralized custody with these players. To some degree, it jeopardizes the decentralized mission of Bitcoin, of people having agency and sovereignty over their own money. They're owning a derivative. So yes, the ETF is good for the number go up, and perhaps you've said it's been good for Swan business right now, but ultimately, do you see it as a positive?
So it's not, it's just a reality. And it's something that Satoshi and Hal Finney talked about all the way back in 2010, that it was inevitable. There would be governments and banks and asset managers owning Bitcoin. It's an asset that is expected to increase in its purchasing power over time. And that's something that people want in their portfolios. So I think quibbling over whether they should or not, it's almost better to just take it as a reality that institutions and governments will own Bitcoin, and then kind of pick apart some of these arguments. It does not affect the decentralization of Bitcoin. It does not affect the purity of the underlying asset as far as who owns it. It does, if you want to sort of take that with a more sort of broad interpretation, it absolutely means that more people than were before are going to be holding a version of Bitcoin that is probably not optimal for what Bitcoin was designed as, which is, global money and friction-free commerce and being able to take self-custody, in particular, it being a bearer asset. So these Bitcoin ETFs and anytime you have custody to Bitcoin that you can't withdraw and has cash settle or whatever, you're trusting a custodian, or you don't even actually have claim to the underlying, which was obviously when you had some of these crypto savings platforms that collapsed, they actually owned the Bitcoin, not you. You just kind of owned a number on a screen until you didn't. So yeah, I think what happens though is as people get into Bitcoin, and I'd say the ETFs are doing a very good job of marketing what Bitcoin is for the most part, and that is drawing people into the space and giving them exposure to the price of Bitcoin. And then as people get deeper down the rabbit hole and Bitcoin gets above 0.5% of their portfolio, and they're thinking about 2%, 5%, 10%, that tends to draw people into getting educated much more and coming to appreciate what it is, which is not a hedge against near-term inflation. It's actually a hedge against the money printer. It's a hedge against the inflation of the money supply. And when they start to understand it like that, and they start to look at, confiscations and banking controls, and they look at sort of socialist creep in their home country, if you're in the West, it just doesn't seem to be going in the right direction as far as, capital controls and sort of government overreach. It starts to become a lot more attractive. And so the ETFs essentially become top of funnel for real Bitcoin. I think it's very clear that there's going to be more for market manipulation. How could there not be? I think that a lot of Wall Street firms have been heavily involved in deliberately manipulating the price of Bitcoin since the launch of futures back in 2018. So I think that's been a feature or a bug in the market ever since. But again, it's a reality, and it's something that can be mitigated for yourself just by owning the real thing and not seeking for yourself, your family, your company, paper Bitcoin or some kind of IOU. Just own the real thing. And there were always manipulators in the market before Wall Street got involved, because when it was not institutionalized, there were just Bitcoin whales and traders that would move the market, crypto trading firms that would dump in the midnight hours and kind of wreck all the people that were leveraged long and then pick it up cheap again. There's been market, I guess, trading maneuvers is often a fuzzy gray line between good traders and market manipulation. But in the end, if you own the underlying, you're in good shape.
So, where does this leave us? Cory Klippsten is confident that Bitcoin's biggest moves are still ahead, with institutional adoption pushing it into uncharted territory. And while 2024 is shaping up to be a record-breaking year, Klippsten believes the real fireworks are yet to come. If his predictions keep playing out, we might just be on the brink of Bitcoin's most explosive era yet. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss what's coming next.